Paul Stonehill joins us. The latest research into a phenomenon we've talked about for years on Coast to Coast, the crystal skulls. Who was really in pursuit of these skulls? What's their true history? And what other research has Paul been doing into the extraordinary? He's always filled with good stories. I can't wait to hear the latest coming up next on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. Well, Paul Stonehill, I enjoyed very much doing research alongside of you on the internet this week, looking at your past stories and thinking about what we're going to talk about tonight. But before I get any closer to that, one thing I didn't research very well was your biography. I really couldn't find a lot about you. So let me just ask you, if we're traveling on a plane together and I turn to you and I say, what do you do, Paul Stonehill? How do you describe it to people?
Well, first of all, good evening. What I do for a living is one thing. What I want to do for a living, my full time, is different. But I do perform quite a lot of research. I get it published. Maybe, God willing, one day I can do it full time. I am interested in the history of so-called Eurasian paranormal phenomena,
right?
Especially in the Soviet and Russian research. I am from Ukraine, but I came here many, many years ago. I have kept in touch with people in the former Soviet Union. I know how to collect information. I do my best to analyze it and to present it to the people out west.
Is Stonehill your given name?
No. What
was your original name?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, well.
This is the name I like.
Well, I like the name too, but I'm always curious about names. I love hearing the origins of names, especially names from cultures with which I'm unfamiliar. But okay,
it was
fair
something
enough.
like that. Actually, it was exactly like that, but in completely another language.
It was Stonehill in another language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then, so I still can't know how that sounds. Okay, the interesting part for me on your research, not just the research that you had done into the UFO reports that come out of the former Soviet Union. And I do want to get to some of those tonight. But, of course, the Crystal Skull story, which has become very relevant this year because of the success of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the movie that has been breaking box office records for its producers. Before we get to either of those, though, tell me how you feel about the press conference last week in Denver with the researcher that had the video, which he said was going to change the world by showing a living, breathing ET. What'd you think about all that?
I don't think it's anything serious. Honestly, I don't personally believe that we can get an image of a living and breathing ET unless they come from some primitive culture which is below us. I don't think we can grasp an ET intelligence. I think that they would be higher than us and are higher than us in their development. It's something like if you take a basic ant, a very complex creature, very intelligent creature in many ways. I don't think they know about us. We know quite a lot about them, but they don't know about us. I think we're on the same level with an advanced civilization. So I honestly don't think we can capture a picture of an ET.
Do you believe, based on your research then, that this video, which showed an ET's head supposedly bobbing, up and out of a window, which we are only, by the way, left to assume that's what we were told is in there because we're not allowed to see it. Do you believe that was all faked?
I think it must have been a fake. This is my personal opinion.
Sure. And what's the best photographic evidence that you think has ever existed of extraterrestrials?
I would say the Phobos 1989 photograph of the gigantic object that was visible just before the Soviet spacecraft was kicked out from the orbit and disappeared. I think that's the best. There may be some more. I've heard about other ones. Of course, I think we don't even know of the best pictures because such exist in the archives. I know about the Setka program in the Soviet Union. I'm sure the Americans, the Chinese, and maybe a few other nations have similar.
I will look forward to hearing more about the crystal skulls, but at least while we're here, let me ask you about the latest in Soviet UFO sightings. What have you been hearing through your pipeline?
Well, there are some interesting sightings in the Far East, which is always an area of attraction to UFOs, whatever they may be, because of the Chinese-Russian border, and I'm sure because of the things that can happen in the Far East and the fight for Siberia and the natural resources and so forth. It's one of the so-called hot areas. You don't hear about any major cases as during the Soviet period, because whatever had attracted UFOs to that part of the world was a unique society, basically enveloped in secrecy and conducting experiments, dangerous experiments that sometimes ended like Chernobyl did in 1986. That's a certain attraction. Russia today is a different country. It has its minuses and pluses, but it's not the Soviet Union.
So you think that the ETs, based on your evidence, then are attracted to certain places because of their earthly geopolitical significance?
And because of the damage that can be caused. I think that they serve as guardians. We have not appointed them, but I think they have appointed themselves over us to preclude emergencies that we can create or disasters. Again, Chernobyl comes to mind. There
Sure.
are more to keep in mind.
What would be there, if you were to guess, and I know that, again, if we're to use your analogy, it would be like ants trying to figure out what we're doing, but as best as you could determine, why do you think these ETs are self-appointed referees?
Containment. We may not know the damage we're doing. Actually, we do. If you look at the damage we have done to the oceans and to ecology, we don't know the extent of the damage we can continue to cause. And I believe they do. That's why in my book, I think in both of the books, I mentioned, for example, a case when a gigantic UFO had been sighted over a super-secret Soviet institute that had been creating so-called super weapons, and nobody could do anything. Moscow was, inept. They couldn't chase it away. They couldn't explain it away. But apparently there are reasons, and the reasons again is to safeguard ourselves from our own madness.
But wouldn't that be like us as humans getting into how an ant is developing their anthill? I mean, if they destroy their own anthill, or if these black ants over here get into a death match with these red ants over there, we don't go in and try and sort it out. We just say, well, they destroyed their ecosystem. Enough said. Why would the ETs care if we destroy ours?
Ants don't have nuclear weapons, and I don't know the logic of the universe beyond our borders, let's say beyond our atmosphere. I do know that when we try to cross certain borders, I should say, they stop us, as happened in 1989, as with the Phobos incident, as I'm sure will happen again on Mars.
Well, before we get back to Mars, tell everybody a little bit more about that incident that you referred to and why give a narrative of what happened so that people can better understand.
In 1989, 2 space probes were sent from Earth to study Mars and its moonlet Phobos, most likely of an artificial creation. This was not a Soviet expedition. Soviets played a part in it. Americans played a great part, as well as East and West Europeans. It was a joint expedition, something like maybe a UN, if it had intelligence, would put together. And the first spacecraft, vanished on the way to Mars. The second one came to the orbit of Mars and Phobos. It was to conduct very interesting experiments, including trying to pierce the atmosphere of Phobos. Apparently, whoever is on Mars or in the vicinity of Mars did not want to have that spacecraft there, and the object was kicked out from the orbit. It came back to life, allegedly, maybe a month later. Nobody knows from where, and then it stopped. I've gone through hundreds of Soviet newspapers of the time. It was a different time. It was